Well, good evening, my friends. I just might consider this a Carpo after dark, if you will. I actually got a couple minutes into making a video and realized my camera wasn't going, so I guess I'll try again here. Just got back earlier from our march, the March for Science. So we went down to Portland. It was pouring rain. Fortunately, it stopped raining for the march. And, at least 1,000 dedicated people that actually care about their world, their environment. And having the March for Science on a day like this which is Earth Day. And also one of my best friend's birthday. So he met us down there and we all marched together. Put in the time to speak our minds and to stand up for something that is just kind of a preposterous notion that we should even have to stand up for something like science. Science is looked upon as if it's some sort of a lifestyle choice, as in a religion would be a choice. Science is not a choice, it's a method that people from many different belief systems and backgrounds, male and female, white, black, brown, and yellow, we all use the same methods to observe, see the reactions, see the precipitate, see what happens, document that, and see if we can repeat that for future endeavors. And this is how we've got to where we are. It's only been about 5 centuries of this method, but it's not as if science is anything new. People have been using science, but long before it was a term. It's obvious. And we wanted to see if something worked, and so we would test it. The only difference between a tribe thousands of years ago, trying different herbs over generations and passing it down word of mouth, the only difference between that and science is science would be documented on paper. It's just a more rigid version of what we've been doing forever. So anyhow, it shouldn't need defense, but here we are marching for it because it's being ignored for people who think that opinions hold more weight, that a person thinks that they can go on Twitter and tweet somebody else is a liar and talk about how the media is always lying, and instantly that somehow makes them an expert on everything. And understanding a little bit about psychology, I know that people want a leader, and they're willing to follow anybody who pretends to know what they're talking about. It's pretty unfortunate, but it happens. So anyhow, here we are. The sheep blindly following the sheep, following the shepherd, and they're all being hunted by the wolves, the dogs, the pigs, you name it. However you want to label the metaphor. It's a pretty crazy world to live in where we have to defend something like science. And just the coincidence, not coincidence as much as just absurdity of it having to fall on Earth Day, which is another day that seems that it should go without saying, that we've become so disconnected with our planet that we need to stop and set aside a day to remember it. As I'm sitting here looking out into the vastness of space, and we can't even comprehend the size of it. I don't know if I mentioned this in the last video that got cut off for this one, but no matter how many marbles people put out in the middle of the desert and make fancy little films trying to explain to you how big the Earth is, to the sun, to the universe, none of it resonates. It doesn't comprehend, doesn't compute. The numbers are too big, the ideas are too vast. We're so busy trying to understand outer space, we often forget that the inner space will teach us all we need to know. I'm constantly in connection with the world around me and the universe, and I pay attention to what it tells me, or what I'm telling myself. Maybe whatever delusion I'm creating, however you want to label it. Sometimes when I'm in a certain state of mind, I have these revelations that I have never tried to describe, but I've wanted to mention in videos so many times. And I believe once, a few months back, I did one a video about psychedelic experiences, and I mentioned it briefly, but it was about the layers and the fractal nature of everything, and how everything in our nature seems to fold in on itself. It's like the branches of a tree, for example. It's the simplest way to kind of introduce people to something that a lot of you already know exactly what I'm talking about. And then a lot of you probably say, what the hell are you thinking? What are you smoking? The idea that a tree branches into what they call dendritic patterns. It's branching. It's where branches break down into smaller fractals of themselves, and under a microscope, even the hairs on those leaves on those branches can look similar to the whole tree. And everything seems to follow this pattern. And it's the same way that a whole forest looks like a tree, that looks like a pine needle. It's the same way that an atom kind of represents the solar system, which represents the galaxy, which may represent larger mega galaxies in the universe, and so on and so forth. So there are these little repeating patterns within themselves. And then we hear about things like Fibonacci sequence and the phi ratio, 1.618, and we start finding out that there's these repeating patterns in nature that happen on the nautilus shell or on various flowers, sunflowers and cacti and broccoli. And we hear these, new age type gurus tell us all about it, exactly what all these things mean, and these harmonic resonances and tones, and it's instantly you just got to throw that stuff out. Doesn't matter. What matters is going with your heart to seeing and feeling these things instead of trying to learn them, if that makes sense. And I know it probably doesn't, because it's really hard to explain what I'm thinking, because it's not easily vocalized, but it's living with the realization that there is an underlying pattern to everything, and that trying to define that pattern will lead you nowhere, but trying to ignore it will lead you to even worse places. That if you try to suppress or dismiss the realization that there's a great, amazing beauty and pattern to everything, if you try to ignore that, it will eat you alive, and you might not even realize it if you're in denial. But if you try to go the other way and overly obsess about these patterns and try to understand them on a super deep level, let me give you an example of a guy like Terence McKenna. He's one of my, speaker heroes, if you will. I think he was phenomenal. And not just psychedelics. Psychedelics just opened his mind to a different way of thinking, about novelties and singularities. And all of his work's fantastic, but I can see he got so deep into it that sometimes, he missed the simplicity of kind of hit yourself on the head and say, we just don't know. But he did know that. He knew that we just didn't know. He just reminds me, I guess I remind myself of him in a way sometimes when I'm thinking about things, and I think, oh God, how nuts can we drive ourselves going so deep? And over the years I've learned to just keep it simple. So overthinking things, trying to go, oh my God, the universe is too big, and basically seeing that we don't matter is something that shouldn't bother us. But it shouldn't allow us to swoop in the opposite way and instantly think that we're super important and that our souls matter the most. And, so it's a long way of saying that we take everything as it comes and kind of laugh at the little patterns and hints that we get from the universe. But I feel like I kind of live in that reality all the time. And so when a day like Earth Day comes around, or we have to march for something like science, which to me, I'm not partisan. I don't take sides. In other words, I don't say hate science because I'm religious, or hate religion because I'm scientific minded, or, have a problem. I'm not in denial about the earth, let's say, because I work for a major oil company and because I have to make my profits. But at the same time, I don't obsess over every single company stopping what they're doing right now, because I know that won't happen. I understand that free market and capitalism are important, but without regulations, they run rampant. And all these little things, it's like this realization that there's a fine balance of everything. Things are the way they are for a reason. Many of those reasons are wrong, and many of those reasons can be changed to something better. But sometimes those reasons are just because of that underlying pattern, that archetypal pattern, or that fractal nature of everything, if you will. I think fractal can get tied up kind of in the idea of these visual fractals, but it's not like that. These are like metaphoric situation fractals, if you will. Little moments of awakenings, just like awakenings each day, just like new awakenings each year, and different cycles and different values for them. I guess the one thing I'd like to leave by saying is that even though I think about all these things, it's really important to me in my life that I don't let it consume much of my time to thinking and trying to learn how to speak on an intellectual level, if you will. I think that all these ideas need to be brought down to the mainstream as far as being able to speak about this stuff in layman terms, and that's what I'm trying to do here. Even though I'll throw in a few larger terms that are maybe obscure here and there, generally my language and, the way that I go about explaining myself, I try to do it in a way that anyone could understand. And that's I think is important, that we all need to do that. Because when there's groups of people talking about these high-minded ideas, but I can't understand what they're talking about because they're in too much competition to use the deepest and most complex terminologies and words. It's almost like a game. It's the ego. The ego's speaking, not the person. If we can humble ourselves to speak like little children and still convey those big ideas, then I think we got something figured out. Don't really know what that is, but... So anyway, I'm going to get off the hammock now. I'm going to go back in the house and upload this video about Earth Day and life, and I hope you all have a fantastic evening or morning or whatever you're doing, wherever you're at. I'll be talking to you soon.